One. Boom. All right, ladies and gentlemen, mastering modern business is today's entrepreneurial topic, and we got a good episode for you. So stay tuned. Let's get this one started. Here we go.
Shut up and sit down.
Look, a business can give you everything you want in life: prestige, wealth, freedom. It can also take everything away from you. This show is for those who are willing to take that risk. These are the real life stories of entrepreneurs. But before we start, I have one small favor to ask. Please leave a comment. It can be advice, critiques, tips, feedback, or share this with someone because your engagement is the most valuable and most powerful form of social currency. So thank you, and welcome to another episode of Business Bros. Business Bros. Today we have a remarkable guest who has excelled in creating safe and thriving workplace while providing essential IT services to businesses ranging from small startups to global giants. He's the president of Hostirian and the brilliant mind behind the Clicks and Bricks podcast. His commitment to delivering value is his knack for crafting products that have benefited all parties involved and has earned his recognition as a true business luminary. With his expertise spanning in privacy in the digital era, HR strategies, and the modern workforce, this ingenious product making tactics are invaluable for CEOs, CTOs, founders, and business leaders who prioritize privacy. So get ready to gain insight from our guest's journey of overcoming obstacles and thriving in today's business landscape. And without further ado, let's welcome to the show, Mr. Ken Cox. All right, Ken, welcome to the program, my friend.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, let's jump into this. Like I told you before the show, we got a bunch of young people here in the live studio audience, and I kind of want your kind of heads up. You've been in the space where you get to work with CEOs, CTOs, people who come in from all kinds of different levels of education. If you were to give advice to a 17-year-old kid about to go on a journey today, what advice would you give them as they graduate high school?
Wow. To get into business?
To get into wherever life you think is going to take them, but for sure business, because I like that topic.
Right. So obviously I'm an entrepreneur, and my philosophies on a traditional school system are not the most common. So what I would say is, focus on mindset, healthy lifestyle, and tenacity, right? Those are the things that are really going to push you further. And I know that it's a super huge cliche, but if you don't do what you love to do and you're trying to start a business, you're screwed out of the gate. So if you're just doing it to get the money, you're probably going to have a lot of failures in your life. And so you can put that aside and say, I'm going to do and create the things that I love to create and do the things that I love to do. Because if you don't do that, the challenges of getting these businesses off the ground and then keeping them up and running are so great that if you don't absolutely love it, you're going to quit. You're going to give up.
Business is always going to have its ups and downs. It's going to have its struggles. The things that you thought were going to work are not going to work the way you thought they were. You're going to have to push through that adversity 100%. So let's dive into your business and kind of push through and see if we can come up with some of these adversities that you had to go through and how you went through them. So if you could tell me, like, as simply as you possibly can, every business is selling something. What are you selling?
Well, I currently operate 3 different companies. So River City Internet Group owns Hostirian, and that's our web hosting company. We sell a product called co-location, which is basically a large company's equipment, their servers are inside of our data center. So it's an infrastructure as a service. So servers, air conditioners, generators, uninterruptible power supplies, and basically just, tens of thousands of servers in a giant room that are running and then get them out to the internet. We do that for companies all the way down to the small brick and mortar shop at Main Street, all the way up to the largest companies in the world. One of our largest customer brand is Bear.
That's crazy. So you're telling me that you're hosting these big old computers, you're keeping them cool so they operate at high peak levels.
Correct.
What do these companies do? Why do they need such big servers to run stuff? Isn't the internet like invisible? Like, it doesn't just live somewhere and you can just get it on your phone? How does
Yeah,
that even work?
it lives in giant rooms, and our room is fairly small. We've downsized over the past several years. We hit a pretty big bump in the road in 2016, and that's when I became the president. I was told fix this or shut it down, so I decided to give it a run and fix it. In that, resolving some of those issues was downscaling from about 100,000 square feet of data center down to just right now we're at about 14,000 square feet of data center. So we're running right now about 20,000 computers or servers in our data center. You've got employees all over the world that need to log in, connect to their email accounts, connect to their file storage, and company, the big hyperscalers like Google and stuff like that are fantastic for highly scalable workloads, but they're not really great for, they're still good for standardized workloads, but they're really expensive for standardized workloads. The average legal office knows how many cases they're going to take, how many files they're going to put in, how much processor they need. So having, these hyperscaling cloud solution that's more expensive is just basically throwing money away if you know what your workload's going to be. So that's what.
Let me ask you.
Yeah, go ahead.
In your bio, I mentioned how you work from everybody from startups all the way to some of these big tech giants. So who's the target audience? Like, how do you define and go after particular companies when there's such a vast array of what their needs are when it comes to IT?
Right. So for Hostirian, we it's infrastructure as a service. It doesn't have a huge demand, and the demand when it comes, I always get the bid for it, right? Because I'm one of the only data centers in the St. Louis metro region. What our customers range from St. Louis public libraries, right? So if you check out a book, it all goes through, all those computers, that giant database of where all the books are lives inside of our data center, right? So that's the infrastructure as a service, and it keeps us, moving forward. But then we have all this infrastructure at our fingertips. So we really entrepreneurial spirit. And we like doing startups. Where the businesses that I love doing business with is the brick and mortar Main Street companies. I have a huge passion for Main Street. I think it's under attack from Web 3.0 and Web 2.0 services. And I really like to help the brick and mortar company utilize the tools that Fortune 500s get to use to make their job easier, more streamlined, more automated, and things like that. So the company that we're launching this year is called PPGS, which is Privacy Policy Grading System, right? For your students today, they're agreeing to hefty contracts when they sign up for third-party websites, and they have no idea what the legalese means there, right? So they're basically giving up their rights to privacy to a corporation who's may or may not be in ties with our government or any other government for that matter. And they're giving up huge amounts of their privacy without really understanding it. And there's no time frame on a lot of these policies that say, hey, we're going to expire your data that you'd share with us in this amount of time. So we developed PPGS as a privacy policy grading system on a rubric that grades a policy from A to F so that the 13-year-old that we're allowing sign up for these services has some kind of idea of what they're signing up for with a basic risk assessment. The plan long-term is to give that data out to the world at no charge and let corporate America pay for that, because in corporate America, if you're publicly traded or you charge people with credit card, you process credit cards, you have annual audits. You've got Sarbanes-Oxley. If you're publicly traded, you got an SSAE 18. If you provide services to customers that represent a significant financial impact, right? Their insurance company says, I want this audit done, third-party audit. Well, when you do that, one of those audit pieces is vendor review. And right now, when I talk to CEOs and CSOs, chief security officers, I ask them a couple questions. I'm like, do you do vendor review? And they say, yes. I'm like, do you review the privacy policies? And they're like, I'm not really sure. Should you review those policies? The answer is absolutely yes. But to have a lawyer read them, understand them, is wildly expensive, right? The average small company bringing in about 1.5 million a year has 50 vendors. Read 50 privacy policies and understand them would take at least 50 hours of labor from a lawyer at $250 an hour, right? And you got to do that every year. It's challenging. So we wrote PPGS to solve that problem for corporate America, the CSO. Something that your students probably should know. If you become a chief security officer for a company, you have personal liability associated to you that the corporation does not protect you from.
That's scary.
Kind of like a CFO, right? So a CFO has personal liability that that he has when he's signing off with government documents and things like that, that the company does not protect you from.
Yeah, and that's scary. That personal liability goes a long way. Piercing that corporate veil could be very terrifying and can literally ruin you if you do things incorrectly. So you want to make sure you do that. And I mean, you talk about privacy policies and how important it is to read them. And we all know that for the most part, when it comes to any of those privacy policies, all those things that you were talking about, the 13-year-old just kind of scrolls to the bottom. It's not just the 13-year-old. Most people scroll to the bottom of all that wording, hit I agree, but they don't necessarily understand what they're agreeing to. And you're saying you basically have a grading system to kind of take a look at these privacy policies and analyze whether it's something that makes sense for this particular company to move forward, kind of not really skirting the attorney, because by all means, we always say the same thing in business, right? Make sure you have an attorney look this over. Yes. But it gives you the ability to kind of look at this stuff from a 10,000 point overview and say, look, on a scale of A to F, this is where this privacy policy is at. Did I hear it? Did I understand you correctly?
Yeah. So that's the first step, A through F, so that a 13-year-old understands it, right? That's how we teach them in school. So I think that's how we should present the data to them in the real world. Now, F basically is pretty hard to get. It says that I don't have to tell you if I change my policy. I can change it at any time, and I sell your data to anybody that wants to, right? And that kind of gets you an F. And I'm not telling anybody that they shouldn't use these services. I'm just saying that you should be aware of the services that you're using when you go into them and be cautious about what kind of data you're sharing with them.
It can be scary for sure, especially if somebody's going to change the contract out from under you. All right. Well, you've been building this career in this workspace for quite some time. And I'm always impressed with how you can take a concept like this and kind of sell it out to the public. I'm sure you've had hiccups, ups and downs all the way. Can you share some of your guiding principles that kind of helped you achieve some success and maybe some hurdles that you had to overcome in kind of developing your principles and figuring out what worked for you?
Absolutely. And I've got a book getting ready to come out. One of the companies that I own is Box STL, which is a small boxing school here in St. Louis. My wife operates it during the day and I teach there at night. And we have 13 core values, and we're releasing that book coming out. And the first one is don't make excuses, make it happen. Right. So
I got that written on my board. That's funny.
Right. That's the very first one. So, and it rolls into a lot of the other core values that I have. You know, everything is my fault until I can prove otherwise. Right. Mm-hmm. So when you're in IT, I think everybody's had some IT issues and they call the IT support team and they blame you for not knowing how to use the technology. Right. So I believe that it's my duty to assume that it's my fault and take every troubleshooting method that I have at my fingertips before I ever try to blame it on somebody else. So I always assume it's my fault, and I try to resolve it from my perspective for the end user at all times. And that's everything, right? So in business, if I don't have enough money to pay the bills, that's my fault. That's not my predecessor's fault, right? But
that's a huge way of holding accountability, right? Because if it's your fault, if you're acknowledging that it's your fault, then it's also under your control to make that change. And I think when you're pointing the finger at other people when it's not your fault, you're giving up that power to somebody else, because all of a sudden it's not your fault, it's their fault. Well, now they got to fix it. If it's not your fault, it's that person's fault. Well, now they're the ones who's responsible for any change. As soon as you make it your own fault, you have that 100% control. Yeah, you have the blame, right? But at the same time, you have the control to make that change.
Absolutely. And it's hard when it comes down to staff, right? And because if you're in business for a long time, you end up having staff members on your team that the boundaries tend to fade away over the years, right? You've been to now 10 or 15 holiday parties with somebody. You've you've made mistakes with them, you've overcome challenges, and that's a challenge when that person changes how they act or what they do in the company. And my biggest mistake has been allowing those relationships to stay around longer than they probably should have, right? And trying to change somebody, right? So where I fall in, and I for a long time I was like, oh, that employee is a bad employee, and I need to teach them how to, I got to figure out how to make them a better employee, which is part of a coach's job, is to improve people, but you can't change personality, I don't believe. So once you've diagnosed that there's a personality difference in the culture of your company and an employee, I think it's time to cut them. And if you don't, that was the hardest one for me, to look back at myself and say, that was my fault. All the mistakes that these people made were really my fault because I didn't remove them from the company or give them the jobs that they would most strive at the time.
And that's tough to do. I mean, they always tell you that advice at the beginning: don't go in business with your family, don't go into business with your friends. And part of it is because of that. When you find that there's a disconnect or something's not working, it's going to be hard to let them go. But I like the perspective you took here, because they weren't your friends when you first hired them. They became family and friends over the years that you've been in business, and you still have to have a way to kind of separate the two and keep those boundaries in place, even though you watched their kids grow up, you were at their wedding, all these outside factors that oftentimes contribute to a good company culture inside your company could also be the same factors that hold your company back or
Yes.
put you in precarious situations, right?
Yeah, and you never want to be, or I never want to be, in a churn and burn employee situation, right? When I was a kid, I worked in like debt collections for a little bit, right? Like a couple months. I hated it. But it was this churn and burn mentality of, oh, we just bring in new employees, we train them up, they burn out quickly, and we get new people. And I just hate that mentality. So, I really enjoy my average employee at River City or Hostirian has been here for, 15 years.
Let me ask you about your podcast. You got Clicks and Bricks, and yes. It's gained its own set of recognition. Tell me about its inception. What are some insights you want to bring to your audience when you're having the show, when you're putting the content out? How has it benefited you and your business to have content like that being put out on a regular basis?
It's huge. And you asked about the inception. I'm going to be honest and candid here, right? And I tell my guests this all the time. I started Clicks and Bricks. One, I love the brick and mortar in business, right? I love an American saying, I want to try this thing. It's crazy concept, and I'm going to rent some space on a main street. I'm going to start this business, and I'm going to start providing these services or products to these people. I love that. So when I came up with Clicks and Bricks, it was, I've been in the IT industry. I also have a brick and mortar business. How do we merge those two things together to get out to the world? When it started, it was absolutely lead generation to sell my products and services, right? That's what it was. How do I talk to CEOs, CSOs on a regular basis? And I got into about the 4th episode, and I called my shareholders, and not all of my major shareholders, right? And we've got at River City Internet Group, we've got about 30 shareholders total, but I've got just a couple board members. I called my largest shareholder. I said, Brian, I love doing this, like talking with business owners. Like, I absolutely love it about, how they started their business. What is their business about? Absolutely love it. But whenever I have to try to sell them something at the end, I freaking hate it. Like, it takes all my credibility away instantly whenever I change my gears from, hey, I'm learning about your business, to, hey, buy this crap from me. It just felt bad. So, I'd really love to just run with this as a side project for the next couple of years and see what happens. Because everybody I've talked to says, if you're going to do an interview type show and you're going to put it on YouTube or podcast, you really need to wait about the 3rd year when things start happening, right? The 1st year is going to be miserable, and it was. 2nd year was a lot more fun. 3rd year, I got signed onto a network, C-suite network. And I'm just now starting my 4th year, right? At the end of this year will be the 4th year. So halfway through my 2nd year, I got signed on at C-Suite Network. I left them this year. I am not, evidently, me as a business owner, there's a reason behind it. I don't really follow authoritative rules very well. Right? I need to make my own things. I need to have the ability to bring in my own investors, my own advertisers, and things like that. So Brian said, absolutely run with it. You know, you still got all your other duties to do. And what it has created is, I didn't know this 3 years ago when I was starting, that short form video content would be so dang popular in 2020. Right. But it has created this depth of, if somebody's doing research or they want to do business with me, now they can go and watch 400 episodes of Clicks and Bricks and me talking with business owners about their business and understanding that. So it gives a huge checkbox whenever you're selling. The services that I sell they could put my companies out of business, right? I mean, this is their website, their credit card processing, their large databases, their intellectual property. For lawyers that work from their, it's a different world today. People are working from home at a very high rate. So, we sometimes are the connection point to a bunch of remote companies, right? So it's detrimental to their business if we're down. And so at the end of the day, I really sell trust.
Yeah, it's incredible how much power and control you actually have that you maintain for people, right? Like you're literally holding people's livelihoods in a technological closet. At the end of the day, it's a nice and cool closet, but still a closet nonetheless. And I'm always impressed when I talk to people who've been doing this on the podcast space or creating content for a few years, because like you, this is going on 5 years, and what you go into it thinking and what you get out of it over the lifetime has been drastically different. I mean, literally, I'm doing the show in a classroom, trying to show 17-year-old students different opportunities of what life has to offer. I've built an insane database of entrepreneurs and like-minded individuals along the way. August 31st, I'm literally sharing a strategy that we've developed to help people grow their businesses, to take those like brick and mortars that you're talking about and show them what it's actually like to build a scalable business and how to implement tools and processes to do that. And that wasn't the intention at the beginning of this thing, right? That's not what I went in to do,
right?
But it's how it developed over time as you keep doing that. And that's a testament to what entrepreneurship is like. You have an idea in your mind of what your business is going to be like. And as you start to implement things, you start to kind of shift a little bit to the right and then a little bit to the left. And you still have an overall vision of where you want to go, but the path you're thinking and who you are, it's like a caravan in the 1840s. It starts off as one thing on the East Coast, ends up completely different by the time they start mining for gold in California, right? Like it's a whole different ballgame.
And I argue that it's that way in every venture that I've ever started, right? The only one, the ones that fail are the ones that I refuse to adjust on. And I have a lot of failures. Like I've got 3 successful companies and 300 or 400 that are sitting at the waistline, right? That are just dead.
Yeah, no, I feel you.
We're quick starts and fails. And then some, my wife and I started a bakery right after our daughter was born. This is now 16 years ago. And it was just a hobby business for her to kind of, that she could do it at the local commissary and have some work, but still raise the kids, right? And it was just supposed to be part-time, and that's what she was going to do. And we had to make the decision when we got to a point, I'm like, we have to, we're selling 200 dozen cupcakes a week right now. And we had to make the decision, do we want to buy a brick and mortar facility and scale this up or shut it down, because we were at the point where we had to stop taking orders because it was becoming something that we didn't want it to be, right? I think that's for a 17-year-old that is coming out of school and they want to start a business and they want to be an entrepreneur. I think that is probably some advice that you don't hear very often. When it starts to become something you don't want it to be and you can pivot, get out and go do something else, do it, right? Because trying to make it be what you want it to be leads to all kinds of problems. It leads to unhappiness. For me, it led to alcoholism, right? Or I've always had alcohol problems, but going through those really tough years got really, really bad. I almost died in 2016 from liver failure. So it's doing something that you don't want to do on a daily basis I mean, right now you're in school. There's some kids sitting back in the back of the class saying, I don't want to be
I
here.
don't want to be here.
Think about that now for the next 40 years of your life.
Mhm.
And it's just miserable. So getting into a business, and it happens more times than you would think, right? Because I got into hosting because I like servers and computers, and I have wild dyslexia, like super bad dyslexia. So I started typing, in the early 80s because my mom was a huge advocate for me, and she got me to be able to turn my homework in off of a keyboard, right? We had computers, but they weren't anything like today. So I've always had a love for technology and computers and things like that. I had no idea that I had to be balancing checkbooks and working with banks and doing SBA loans and dealing with, in our industry, I have to deal with the FBI from time to time. So I just had no concept of what those other things were when I was like, oh, we'll get into computers. And I know how to do with Linux, so I can build websites in the early 90s, right? Had no clue what I was actually getting myself into. So that's going to happen. You're going to go after your passion. You're going to realize, oh man, there's all kinds of other crap I have to do to chase this passion. So the passion better be real, because there's going to be crap you don't want to do.
Oh, every single day. That's just the way it works. And that's why you got to eat the frog early, right? Get up, do the things that you don't want to do as early as possible, so the rest of your day gets a little bit easier, hopefully.
If you can pay somebody else to do it, that's the best case.
I agree with you on that one. If you can pay somebody else to do it, that's a win right there.
There are people that love doing accounting. I don't understand it, but there are people that love doing it. Pay them to do it.
Yep. Wear the hat that you're best suited for. Ken, you shared a lot of great stuff with us today, and I believe that in business, it's one of those weird things where you're always going to want to do business with somebody that you get along with, somebody that you understand where they're coming from. You've shared that with us for sure here today. If people want to get a hold of you, they want to reach out with you, what's the best way to do that? What can they expect?
The easiest way to get a hold of me is hello@kencox.com. And I would say, or just go to kencox.com and you can see everything about me. My Facebook was actually hacked last week, so I'm currently suspended. Facebook is a pretty good way to find me as well. I am at Ken Cox, or I am Ken Cox at most places. So kencox.com, you can find me, and they're currently redoing the website right now. So you also see any articles that I've been in or I have written as well.
Perfect, man. Thank you very much for coming on the show today. I got one more kind of a selfish question. You're on the techie side. You're on the podcast side as well. And everything from when you got booked on our show to automations, emails, and then coming on and creating, basically taking this long form piece of content that we're going to chop up into short pieces. What was your experience like creating content with the Business Bros?
Enjoyable. I love the long form conversations, just talking. It's I really enjoy just casual conversation about business.
I do too, man. I don't know, man. You're episode 1,204. I think it's something that is definitely a hobby, definitely a habit. It's something I love to do, and I don't think I'm going to stop anytime soon. So, Ken, thank you very much for being on the program today. Appreciate you taking the time. Ladies and gentlemen, clicksandbricks.tv is the website scrolling across the bottom. You can also find more information at kencox.com or shoot him an email. I love his email. It's super simple. It's hello@kencox.com. Just shoot him an email, say hello if you need any help with your hosting type services, and take a look at Clicks and Bricks, because he's here to help you retail businesses take your business from just looking at that walk-through traffic and turning it into something that you can really implement on the long term. So, Ken, thank you very much for being on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace. And we're out.
It's over. Go home. Is your business in need of marketing? Try starting a podcast. But not just any podcast. Podcast like a pro. We can show you how to take your business from being invisible to becoming a brand people trust. Go to www.businessbros.biz to get